mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, Supreme Lord, grant that I may become conscious of Thy presence. The awareness of the Divine Presence in all things and all ways is the best way to lead a spiritual life. With love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Divine Mother. Topic: How to live the spiritual life. Our Divine Mother says to live the spiritual life is to open to another world within oneself. It is to reverse one's consciousness, as it were. The ordinary human consciousness, even in the most developed, even in men of great talent and great realization, is a movement towards outside. All the energies are directed outwards. The whole consciousness is spread outwards, and if anything is turned inwards, it is very little, very rare, very fragmentary. It happens only under the pressure of very special circumstances, violent shocks. The shocks life gives precisely with the intention of slightly reversing this moment of exteriorization of the consciousness. Our Divine Mother says, all who have lived a spiritual life have had the same experience. All of a sudden, something in their being has been reversed, so to speak, has been turned suddenly and sometimes completely inwards, and also at the same time upwards, from within upwards. But it is not an external above, it is within deep something other than the heights as they are physically conceived. Something has literally been turned over. Our Divine Mother says, when the reversal of the being has taken place, all that is finished. One no longer seeks, one sees. One no longer deduces, one knows. One no longer gropes, one walks straight to the goal. And when one has gone further, only a little farther, one knows, feels, lives the supreme truth, that the supreme truth alone acts, the supreme Lord alone wills and knows and does through human beings. How could there be any possibility of error there? What he does because he wills to do it. For our mistaken vision, these are perhaps incomprehensible actions, but they have a meaning and an aim and lead where they ought to lead. Our Divine Mother says you can create your atmosphere by controlling your thoughts, turning them exclusively towards the sadhana, controlling your actions, turning them exclusively towards the sadhana, abolishing all desires and all useless external ordinary activity, like a more intense inner life, separating yourself from ordinary things, ordinary thoughts, ordinary reactions, ordinary actions. Then you create a kind of atmosphere around you.
Like one who sightless listens to a command, so were they immobile on that earthly field. Powers not of earth, though one in human clay. Luminous, he moved away, behind him death.
Our Divine Mother says, for example, instead of reading any odd thing and chatting and doing anything, whatever, if you read only what helps you to follow the path, if you act only in conformity with what can lead you to the divine realization, if you abolish in yourself all desires and impulses, turn towards external things, if you calm your mental being, appease your vital being, if you shut yourself against suggestions coming from outside and become immune to the action of the people surrounding you, you create such a spiritual atmosphere that nothing can touch it, and it no longer depends at all on circumstances or on whom you live with or on conditions you live in, because you are enclosed in your own spiritual atmosphere. And that is how one obtains it, by turning one's attention solely to the spiritual life, by reading only what can help in the spiritual life, by doing only what leads you to the spiritual life, and so on. Then you create your own atmosphere. But naturally, if you open all doors, listen to what people tell you, follow the advice of this one and the inspirations of that one, and are full of desires for outward things, you cannot create a spiritual atmosphere for yourself. You will have an ordinary atmosphere like everybody else. Our Divine Mother says the only true attitude for a yogi is to be plastic and ready to obey the divine command, whatever it may be. Nothing must be indispensable to him, nothing a burden. Often, the very first impulse of those who want to live the spiritual life is to throw away all they have, but they do it because they want to be rid of a burden, not because they want to surrender to the divine. Our Divine Mother says men who possess wealth and are surrounded by the things that give them luxury and enjoyment turn to the divine, and immediately their movement is to run away from these things, or, as they say, to escape from their bondage. But this is a wrong movement. You must not think that the things you have belong to you, they belong to the divine. If the divine wants you to enjoy anything, enjoy it, but be ready too to give it up the very next moment with a smile. Question: Sweet Mother, where does our true spiritual life begin? For this, our Divine Mother says, the true spiritual life begins when one is in communion with the divine in the psychic, when one is conscious of the divine presence in the psychic and in constant communion with the psychic. Let me repeat. Our Divine Mother says the true spiritual life begins when one is in communion with the divine in the psychic, when one is conscious of the divine presence in the psychic and in constant communion with the psychic. Then the spiritual life begins, not before. The true spiritual life. Our Divine Mother says, when one is united with one's psychic being and conscious of the divine presence and receives the impulses for one's action from this divine presence, and when the will has become a conscious collaborator with the divine will, that is the starting point. Before that, one may be an aspirant to the spiritual life, but one doesn't have a spiritual life. From the collective works of our Divine Mother, Volume 9, page 413, Volume 6, page 356, and Volume 3, page 54, and Volume 8, page 135. Spiritual rebirth. Our Divine Mother says, spiritual rebirth and utter casting away of all the ordinary past. Our Divine Mother says, for spiritual rebirth means the constant throwing away of our previous associations and circumstances and proceeding to live as if at each virgin moment we were starting a life anew. It is to be free of what is called karma, the stream of our past actions. In other words, a liberation from the bondage of nature's common activity of cause and effect. When this cutting away of the past is triumphantly accomplished in the consciousness, all those mistakes, blunders, errors, follies, which still vivid in our recollection, cling to us like leeches, sucking our lifeblood, drop away, leaving us most joyfully free. This freedom, says our Divine Mother, this freedom is not a mere matter of thought. It is the most solid, practical, material fact. We really are free. Nothing binds us, nothing affects us. There is no obsession of responsibility. If we want to counteract, annul or outgrow our past, we cannot do it by mere repentance or similar things. We must forget that the untransformed past has ever been and enter into an enlightened state of consciousness which breaks loose from all moorings. Our Divine Mother says, to be reborn means to enter, first of all, into our psychic consciousness where we are one with the divine and eternally free from the reactions of karma. Let me repeat. Our Divine Mother says to be reborn means to enter, first of all, into our psychic consciousness where we are one with the divine and eternally free from the reactions of karma. Our Divine Mother says, without becoming aware of the psychic, it is not possible to do so. But once we are securely conscious of the true soul in us, which is always surrendered to the divine, all bondage ceases. Then incessantly life begins afresh. Then the past no longer cleaves to us. To give you an idea of the final height of the spiritual rebirth, I may say that there can be a constant experience of the whole universe actually disappearing at every instant and being at every instant newly created. Words of our Divine Mother, Volume 3, 176 is the page number. These are the words of our Divine Mother.
In large way, to all